Hello, welcome to Dunn podcast. I'm your host Justin. Today we're reviewing a Warhammer Fantasy graphic novel, Tales from the Ten-Tailed Cat, which is what's it called? Black Library book, which Black Library is the publication house for all Warhammer like related titles and books, right? Which, if people don't know what Warhammer Fantasy is, Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k is a tabletop miniature war game. And I have an example of some Warhammer Fantasy models. This is a Warrior Chaos. Painted this like a decade ago, so like the, yeah. I don't have I have an army of these, but I didn't paint all of them. I got too lazy. I painted like 3 of them. And one of them fell off the shelf and broke. Man, it's not focusing. And here's Dark Elf Corsair. These fuckers are hard to paint. Oh my god. As you can see, the face, you can't see, but the face, I just painted flesh tone. I didn't paint any eyes, because, like, god damn it, would have been super hard, considering how small the face is. Yeah. Yeah, so those were, yeah, so Warhammer Fantasy is, pretty cool setting. They even made an MMO a while ago. I forget what it was called, but, yeah. And they actually ended Warhammer Fantasy, the game, and made a new game with specialized rules and new armies called Age of Sigmar, which Sigmar is the god. So if you want to play Warhammer Fantasy, it might be hard to find players, but yeah, like, you know, Warhammer Age of Sigmar is the new version of the game. Yeah, so this book is an anthology. Oh, here's the rules of the bar, by the way. Which the book takes place mostly in a bar, right? Which there are. How the book works, it's an anthology book. There's like 8 stories, and most of the books are people telling stories of stuff that's happened to them. So the book is. Some of the stories are written by Dan Abnett, who's worked for like Marvel Comics and DC Comics, right? And written lots of people's favorites like Warhammer 40k and, you know, Warhammer Fantasy novels. You got Jaspre Bark, Christian Dunn, Gordon Rennie, Mitchel Scanlon, Stu Taylor, Nick Vincent, and art by Jim Brady, Paul Davidson, Richard Elson, Andrew Hepworth, P.J. Holden, Paul Jeacock, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. Karl Kopinski, Clint Langley, Ian Peterson, Sharp Brothers, Adrien Smith, and Tiernen Trevallion. Yeah, so one problem I have with the book is that it's in black and white, which makes some of the more like heavily shaded stories kind of hard to tell what the hell's going on. Like here, this is beautiful art, and look, you can kind of, it's hard to tell what's going on because it's black and white and there's all the shading, right? So it would have been nice if that was in color. Which this was more of a funny story. It's about, this story kind of reminded me of The Hobbit. It's about like how this guy goes into a tavern. This dwarf goes to tell the story about how him and his kin went on a quest to this like dwarven fortress that's overrun by goblins to find this ale by this famous brewmeister called Bugman's Ale, and they only 2 of his kin made it to find the ale, and the other one dies, and his casket, which he can only carry one, gets like gets an axe in it, and like he spills all the ale, only gets like a cupful, right? And it's like how like, oh, that was the best ale he ever had. So this story is another kind of comedic one where it's about this catcher who has like a shirt made out of like rat hide, who went, and nobody will believe him that he went into the ruins and encountered sewers and encountered rat men, which, if you know anything about Warhammer Fantasy, that's the Skaven, right? Which there's even a PS1 Warhammer Fantasy game. I forget what it's called, but like, yeah, it's about the Skaven, right? I almost bought it, but it was like super expensive. So then some of these stories are horror themed, like this one about a poet who writes a poem that turns people into demons thanks to the powers of chaos, right? Yeah. This was another comedy one, where about like two thieves masquerading as musicians hypnotize a crowd and are robbing them, but you have one deaf Norseman, right? Which these guys are usually chaos. See them stealing, and like beats the shit out of them, and starts a huge brawl, right? And like I said, the reason he wasn't hypnotized because he's deaf, right? Yeah, that was a cool one. You got the Tale of a Prophet, where this is another comedy one where this seer guy tells everybody, hey, the world's gonna end at midnight, and midnight comes around and the world doesn't end, so they kill him, right? And like, yeah, you have there's other stories where like, yeah, it's horror themed, right? There's the assassin one, where this one's a little feminist, where you have like a female assassin bragging to other assassins and how great she is, and she has a way higher kill rate than them. She has 73 kills. They have like 20 or so. This one has like 34. But yeah, that was a decent story. Alright. That one took place in I think her story took place in Mordheim, right? This was another dark one, where the guy tells a story about how he saved two elves from a monster, and it turns out he was killed by the monster, and that he was like dreaming the whole thing thanks to the elves. This one's about like a puppeteer whose puppets this guy is selling puppets from a famous puppeteer, and this guy wants to buy them, and it turns out like all the puppets were made from people, and then like the guy who buys the puppets was the original owner of the puppets and turns the guy into a puppet, right? And like, you got another story, there's like a story, the one with the best art is about a vampire slayer, so I thought that was cool. And you get some ads for other Warhammer Fantasy graphic novels, which I wouldn't mind picking up. This one sounds cool. So yeah, I really enjoyed the book. The art was pretty good. Overall, the art was good, though some of the stories for the art were kind of bad. There was only like 2 out of 8 where the art was bad. Overall, I really enjoyed the stories. Some of them have different genres, like horror, comedy, like, you know, high fantasy, just straight up like dark, like dark like tragedy story. But I really enjoyed this book, and this is only like $10. So if you can get it for $10, it's totally worth it. And plus, I will say this is super thin, right? But it took me way over an hour to read because there's lots of dialogue and narration in this book, right? With the stories, man. So it not only is the book cheap, but it's very beefy with content. Yeah, it's gonna take you a while to read, man, because of all the narration and stuff. I really enjoyed this book, and if I were to give this a rating, 7 out of 10. Wish I read it earlier, man. Because, like, man, I had this book for years. I never got around to reading, but it's actually pretty cool. And if you look on the cover, you can see all the protagonists from the different stories, including the bartender, right? So I thought that was pretty cool. So for my next review, I'm going to be reviewing a DC book, New 52's Aquaman, Volume 2, The Others, by Geoff Johns and Ivan Reis.